Chapter 1. The Sanctuary of Shadows. The rain came down in sheets, turning the cobblestone streets into rivers of reflected neon and gaslight. Elena pressed herself against the brick wall of an alley, her breath coming in ragged gasps that fogged the October air. Her ribs ached where Marcus had grabbed her, his fingers leaving bruises she could already feel blooming beneath her soaked blouse. The wedding ring on her finger felt like a shackle, cold and tight. She had finally done it. After 3 years of walking on egg glass, of making herself smaller and quieter, of believing his apologies, she had run. The streets of the old quarter were unfamiliar, a maze of European architecture that the city had preserved from centuries past. Elena had grabbed nothing but her phone and the coat on her back. No plan, no destination, just the animal need to be anywhere Marcus wasn't. Her phone buzzed for the 15th time. She didn't look at it. Through the rain, a warm light caught her attention. A small cafe sat tucked between a closed bookshop and a building with dark windows. The sign above the door read, "Nocturne," in elegant script, and despite the late hour, past midnight now, the interior glowed with amber light. Elena's legs moved before her mind could catch up. She needed warmth. She needed to sit down before she collapsed. She needed 4 walls between her and the world. The door opened soundlessly beneath her trembling hand. Inside, the cafe defied all logic. While rain battered the streets, this space existed in another era entirely. Dark wood paneling climbed the walls, interspersed with burgundy velvet and brass fixtures that caught the light from candelabras placed throughout the room. Classical music played softly, a piano piece she didn't recognize, melancholy and old. The air smelled of coffee, old books, and something else. Something like smoke and spices she couldn't name. There were no other customers. Behind the counter stood a man who made Elena forget, for just a moment, why she was there. He was tall, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that suggested he'd run his hands through it recently. His features were aristocratic, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips that looked carved from marble. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Even from across the room, they were startling. Dark, yes, but with something luminous beneath, like light reflecting off deep water. He was looking directly at her. "We're closed," he said. His voice was low, accented with something European she couldn't place. Not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. Elena's voice cracked. She became suddenly aware of how she must look. Soaked to the bone, mascara probably running, a wild-eyed woman stumbling in from the storm. "I'm sorry." The sign said open. The sign is old. He didn't move from behind the counter, but his gaze traveled over her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You're hurt." It wasn't a question. Elena touched her cheek reflexively, feeling the tender spot where Marcus had struck her before she'd run. She'd forgotten about that. "I just need..." She swayed suddenly, the adrenaline that had carried her through the streets finally abandoning her. The room tilted. He moved so fast she barely saw it. One moment he was behind the counter. The next, his hand was on her elbow, steadying her with a grip that was surprisingly gentle, despite the obvious strength in his fingers. "Sit," he commanded, guiding her to one of the velvet chairs near a small table. "Before you fall." Elena collapsed into the seat, her body suddenly heavy. She couldn't stop shaking, from cold or shock or fear. She didn't know anymore. Everything was catching up with her at once. The man disappeared behind the counter. She heard water running, the clink of porcelain. When he returned, he carried a cup of tea and a towel. He set both on the table and stepped back, maintaining a careful distance. "Drink," he said. "You're in shock." She wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. The tea was dark and fragrant, unlike anything she'd tasted before. Herbal, but with an edge of something bitter. "Thank you," she whispered. He said nothing. Instead, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat, studying her with those unsettling eyes. He moved with such control, she realized. Every gesture deliberate and contained, as if he was constantly aware of his own body and space. "Are you going to call someone?" he asked. "No." The word came out too quickly, too sharp. Elena forced herself to breathe. "No, I just needed to get inside for a moment, out of the rain. You're running from someone. Again, not a question. Elena felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see straight through her skin to all the broken parts underneath. It doesn't matter, she said quietly. It matters if he followed you. The man's eyes flickered toward the window, toward the dark street beyond. This neighborhood is old, quiet. People don't wander here by accident. Are you always this welcoming to customers? Elena meant it as a joke, but it came out wrong, defensive and raw. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. I told you. We're closed. Then why did you let me in? He was quiet for a long moment. The piano music swelled and faded in the background. Finally, he said, You looked like you needed sanctuary. The word settled over her like a blanket. Sanctuary. When was the last time she'd felt safe? What's your name? She asked. He hesitated as if this was a dangerous question. Lucienne. Elena. Elena. He said her name like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth. Finish your tea. Then you need to tell me who you're running from and whether he's the type of man who will come looking. Why do you care? Lucienne's eyes met hers, and for just a second she saw something flicker in their depths, something dark and very old. Because, he said softly, some doors, once opened, cannot be easily closed again. And you just walked through mine. Chapter 2. The threshold Elena finished the tea, though her hand still trembled against the porcelain. The warmth spread through her chest, easing some of the panic that had clawed at her throat since she'd fled her apartment. Lucian remained across from her, perfectly still in a way that no normal person could manage. He didn't fidget, didn't shift his weight, just watched her with those dark, luminous eyes. His name is Marcus, she heard herself say. The words felt like stones pulled from deep water. My husband. Ex-husband, soon-to-be, I mean. I'm leaving him, tonight. Again, not a question. Lucian seemed to deal in certainties. Tonight, Elena confirmed. I should have left 2 years ago, or 3. But I kept thinking... She stopped herself. This stranger didn't need her pathetic rationalizations. He'll be looking for me. He always finds me when I've tried before. Something changed in Lucian's expression, a hardness entering his features sharp as winter frost. You've tried to leave before. Twice. He found me both times within hours. Brought me back, convinced me it was my fault for overreacting. Elena's laugh was bitter. I'm sure he's already called the police. Told them I'm having a breakdown. He's very good at making himself believable. And making you seem unstable? Yes. The word came out as a whisper. It was horrifying, hearing someone else understand the pattern so clearly. He'll check my friends' places first. My sister's, then hotels. He knows my credit cards, my phone. Her phone buzzed again on the table between them. Marcus's name lit up the screen. Elena flinched. Lucienne's hand moved faster than she could track, covering the phone with his palm. His skin was cool against hers when their fingers accidentally touched. Not cold exactly, but lacking the warmth she expected from another person. Don't answer, he said. Not yet. Not until you've decided what you're going to do. What can I do? I have nowhere to go, no money, except what's in our joint account, which he'll freeze the moment he realizes I'm serious this time. No car, it's in his name. I didn't even grab my purse when I ran. The reality of her situation crashed over her like the rain still hammering the windows. God, I was so stupid. I should have planned better. You survived. Lucian's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. That's not nothing. Many people in your situation don't. There was something in the way he said it, a weight that suggested experience, though Elena couldn't imagine this composed, controlled man ever being at anyone's mercy. I can't stay here, she said, forcing herself to face the practical truth. I've already imposed too much. I'll find a shelter, or he'll check the shelters. Then Elena. The way Lucian said her name made her stop mid-sentence. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. If your husband is the kind of man I suspect he is, possessive, systematic, with resources, he will find you anywhere ordinary, anywhere predictable. You need to disappear somewhere he won't think to look. Like where? I don't exactly have a secret underground bunker. No. Lucian was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh something in his mind. But I do have rooms, upstairs. This building is old, built with certain protections. People who don't know it's here often walk right past without seeing it. It's not on modern maps. The city records list it as abandoned. Elena stared at him. You're offering to let me stay here? With you, a complete stranger? I'm offering you sanctuary. He stood, moving to the window. His reflection in the glass was oddly dim, she noticed. A trick of the candlelight, probably. Short term. Until you can think clearly, make a proper plan. Contact a lawyer, access resources your husband doesn't control. Why would you do that? Suspicion crept into Elena's voice despite herself. In her experience, men didn't offer help without expecting something in return. What do you want? Lucien turned from the window, and for a moment his face was unreadable. Then something softened in it. Not quite a smile, but close. I want, he said carefully, to not find you dead in an alley tomorrow because you had nowhere safe to go. Call it a personal preference. You don't even know me. I know enough. He moved back toward her, his footsteps soundless on the wooden floor. I know you're afraid, but still thinking clearly enough to question my motives, which is wise. I know you ran with nothing, which means you've reached a breaking point. And I know... He paused, his eyes flickering to the bruise on her cheek. I know what it looks like when someone has been systematically broken down over time. You're not broken yet, Elena, but you will be if you go back. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. She felt tears burn behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She was so tired of crying. I can't pay you, she said. Not now. Maybe not for a while. I don't want payment. Everyone wants something. Then consider it a trade. Lucien moved back behind the counter, creating distance between them again. You need safety. I need... He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. I need someone who can move in daylight hours. Run errands. Handle things during times when I'm... unavailable. It was an odd way to phrase it, but Elena was too exhausted to question further. Besides, the alternative was the street, or going back to Marcus, and both of those options felt like death. Just for a few days, she said, until I figure out my next move. A few days, Lucien agreed, though something in his tone suggested he knew it would be longer. Her phone buzzed again. Then again, Marcus was getting desperate. Elena could imagine him pacing their apartment, rage building with each unanswered call. The rooms are through here. Lucien moved toward a door at the back of the cafe, one Elena hadn't noticed before. It was set into the paneling so seamlessly it looked like part of the wall. There's a bedroom, bathroom, a small sitting area. The door locks from inside. You'll be safe. Elena stood on shaking legs and followed him. As she crossed the threshold behind the counter, she felt a strange sensation, like walking through a curtain of cool water. The air changed, grew heavier somehow, thick with age and secrets. Lucien? He stopped on the stairs leading up, turning to look back at her. Thank you, she said, for this, whatever your reasons. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim stairwell. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. You don't know what you've walked into. Then he turned and continued up the stairs, leaving Elena to follow him into the dark. Chapter 3. Nocturnal Patterns. The room Lucien led her to was unlike anything Elena had expected. Where the cafe below had felt deliberately theatrical with its candelabras and velvet, this space was simply... old. Authentically, impossibly old. The walls were stone, not drywall painted to look like stone. The furniture, a 4-poster bed with heavy curtains, a writing desk, a wardrobe that looked hand-carved, belonged in a museum. Even the window glass was wavy and thick, the kind that hadn't been made in over a century. How long have you lived here? Elena asked, setting her phone on the bedside table. It had finally stopped buzzing. A long time. Lucien stood in the doorway, not entering. She noticed he seemed to have an aversion to crossing thresholds uninvited. The bathroom is through there. You'll find clothes in the wardrobe. They belong to my sister. You're about her size. Your sister lives here? No. She hasn't lived anywhere for quite some time. Something painful flickered across his face, there and gone in an instant. The door locks, as I said. I won't disturb you. Sleep as long as you need. What time do you open the cafe? Elena asked, suddenly aware that she'd essentially moved into her potential employer's home. I don't keep regular hours. Lucian's hand rested on the door frame, his posture suggesting he wanted to leave, but was restraining himself out of politeness. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Though I should warn you, I'm not often available during daylight. I keep unusual hours. Night owl? Elena attempted a weak smile. Something like that. He turned to go, then paused. Elena, whatever you hear tonight, in the building, outside, anywhere, don't open that door unless I tell you it's safe. Do you understand? The seriousness in his tone sent a chill down her spine. Is someone coming? I don't know. But your husband will be searching, and this neighborhood attracts other things as well. Things that hunt in the dark. He must have seen the fear in her face because he added more gently, You're safe inside these walls. I promise you that. But only inside. Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. Elena stood alone in the strange, ancient room and tried to process the surreality of her situation. 12 hours ago, she'd been chopping vegetables for dinner in her apartment, trying to ignore the tension radiating from Marcus in the next room. Now she was standing in what felt like a vampire's lair, accepting shelter from a man who moved too quickly and spoke in ominous warnings. Vampire's lair. The thought made her laugh, a slightly hysterical sound in the quiet room. She was losing it. But when she explored the bathroom, more stone, a clawfoot tub, fixtures that were genuine brass gone green with age, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, and the laughter died. The bruise on her cheek was darkening to purple. Her eyes looked haunted, ringed with smudged makeup. Her wet hair hung in tangles around her shoulders. She looked like a ghost. Or a victim. Or both. Elena stripped off her wet clothes and ran the bath as hot as she could stand it. The wardrobe had indeed contained women's clothing, all of it outdated but beautiful. Silk dresses, wool skirts, blouses with pearl buttons. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. She chose a simple nightgown, white cotton, long-sleeved, and laid it on the bed. The bath helped. She soaked until her fingers pruned and the shaking finally stopped. When she emerged, she felt almost human again. Fragile but present. She should sleep. God knew she needed it. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face contorted with rage, heard the sound of his hand connecting with her cheek, felt the desperate scramble to get out the door before he grabbed her again. Instead, she found herself at the window, looking down at the street below. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the cobblestones slick and gleaming. The streetlights cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. It must have been past 2 a.m. now, but she could see movement in the darkness. A figure stood across the street, perfectly still. Looking up at the building, Elena's heart seized. Marcus. He'd found her already. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized the figure was wrong. Too tall, too thin. And the way it stood, utterly motionless despite the cold, there was something off about it. As she watched, another figure joined the first. Then a third. They didn't speak or move, just stood there staring at the cafe. At her window, Elena stumbled back, her pulse hammering. She thought about Lucian's warning. Don't open that door unless I tell you it's safe. What had he said? This neighborhood attracts other things. Things that hunt in the dark. She heard a sound then. Voices, low and urgent, coming from somewhere below. One of them was Lucienne's. The other was unfamiliar, rougher, with an edge of menace. Not your concern, Lucienne. We know she's here. We can smell her. She's under my protection. That makes her very much my concern. Lucian's voice was colder than Elena had heard it, layered with something dangerous. Your protection? Since when do you shelter strays? Especially mortal ones who bring trouble to our doorstep? Mortal ones. Elena pressed her ear to the door, her breath shallow. What she brings is her own business, Lucian said. She's claimed sanctuary. By the old laws, I'm bound to grant it. The old laws are dying, Lucian. You know that. The houses are fracturing. Without the accords still stand in this district. My district. And I say she stays. There was a long, tense silence. Then the rough voice again. Closer now, just outside her door. We'll see what the House of Thorn has to say about that. They've been watching this place. Watching you. They know you're weakened. Let them watch. Elena heard footsteps retreating down the stairs, then nothing but silence, broken only by the sound of her own racing heart. She waited, counting her breaths, until finally there was a soft knock at her door. Elena. Lucian's voice, quiet and controlled again. You can come out. They're gone. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers. Lucian stood in the narrow hallway, and for the first time she noticed details she'd missed before. The way his chest didn't rise and fall with breath, the absolute stillness of him, the fact that his shadow seemed thinner than it should be in the candlelight. What are you? She whispered. Lucian met her eyes and she saw the decision being made in them. A boundary crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Come downstairs, he said finally. If you're going to stay here, there are things you need to understand. About this place, about me, about what walks these streets after dark. He turned and descended the stairs, leaving Elena with a choice. Return to the safety of ignorance, or follow him into whatever truth waited below. After only a moment's hesitation, she followed. Some doors, once opened, cannot be easily closed again. Chapter 4. Blood and Truth. The cafe felt different when Elena descended the stairs. Colder, despite the candles still burning in their sconces. The shadows seemed to move independently of the light, pooling in corners like living things. Lucian stood behind the counter, pouring dark liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass. Not wine, Elena noticed. Something thicker. She forced herself to keep walking until she reached the chair she'd sat in earlier. It felt like days ago instead of hours. Sit, Lucian said, his back still to her. Please. Elena sat, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but where would she go? Back to the street where those figures had been standing? Back to Marcus? At least here, Lucian had protected her from whatever those others were. He turned finally, carrying 2 glasses. He set one in front of her. Tea again, she realized with relief, and kept the other for himself. In the candlelight, the liquid in his glass looked almost black. You heard the conversation, he said. Some of it. Enough. Elena wrapped her hands around the tea but didn't drink. They called me mortal. Mortal ones, like there's another kind. There is. Lucian sat across from her, mirroring their earlier position. But this time his posture was different, less guarded, more resigned. I was going to ease you into this. Give you a few days to recover before explaining. But they've forced my hand. Explaining what? Though Elena already knew, had known from the moment she'd seen those figures in the street, from the way Lucian moved too fast, from the chill of his skin. Her mind had been rejecting the obvious truth, but her body had known all along. I am not human. Elena. Haven't been for a very long time. He lifted his glass, and she watched the dark liquid catch the light. What walks these streets? What lives in the old buildings of this district? We are what your stories call vampires. Though the word doesn't capture the reality of it. We are older than your religions, bound by laws your kind has forgotten existed. The word hung in the air between them. Vampire. It should have sounded ridiculous, like something from a bad movie. But in this room, with this man, it felt like the only truth that made sense. You're gonna kill me. Elena was surprised by how calm her voice sounded. Maybe she was beyond fear now. Maybe she'd used it all up on Marcus. No. Lucian's response was immediate and firm. If I wanted you dead, you'd have died the moment you crossed my threshold. But I don't kill indiscriminately, Elena. I don't kill at all if I can avoid it. That's part of why I'm isolated. Why the others were questioning my choices. The others. Those things outside. Vampires from other houses. Other bloodlines. He set down his glass untouched. We're organized into houses, each with territories, laws, hierarchies. This district belongs to me, or did, before I withdrew from house politics. I claimed neutrality decades ago. Some respect that. Others see it as weakness. Elena's mind raced, trying to process information that should be impossible. The House of Thorn, the one they mentioned. One of the oldest and most ruthless. They've been expanding their territory, absorbing smaller houses, breaking the old treaties. If they know you're here, they'll use you as leverage against me. Lucian leaned forward, his eyes intense. That's why you can't leave this building, not yet. Not until I can secure your safety. So I've traded one prison for another. The bitterness in Elena's voice surprised even her. No. Lucian's tone sharpened. I am not your husband. You're not a prisoner here. But I won't lie to you about the danger. Those vampires outside can smell human blood from blocks away. They know you're mortal, vulnerable, and under my protection. To some, that makes you a target. To others, a prize. Why? Elena finally lifted the tea to her lips, needing something to do with her hands. Why do you care what happens to me? Why offer protection at all? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, threaded with something that might have been pain. I had a sister once, Marguerite, human like you. She came to me for help, running from a man who hurt her. I was younger then, newly turned, and I thought I could protect her while keeping her ignorant of what I'd become. I thought I was being kind, sparing her the truth. What happened? She left. Thought I was hiding something from her, which I was, and didn't trust me. She went back to him. Lucian's hands tightened around his glass. He killed her 3 days later. By the time I learned what had happened, she was already in the ground. The weight of his grief was palpable in the small space between them. Elena felt her own pain resonate with it. Different circumstances. Same fundamental loss. I'm sorry, she whispered. I swore then that if I ever had another chance, I wouldn't make the same mistake. I wouldn't hide the truth out of misplaced kindness. I wouldn't let someone walk blindly into danger they couldn't understand. His eyes met hers. So yes, Elena, I care what happens to you. Not because I know you, but because I failed someone like you before. Elena processed this, her worldview tilting on its axis. Everything she'd believed about reality had just been shattered, and yet somehow the most unbelievable part was finding genuine compassion in a creature that shouldn't exist. The blood, she said, gesturing to his glass. You have to drink it. Human blood. Yes, though not as often as stories suggest, and never without consent. There are donors, humans who understand what we are and choose to provide for us. It's part of the old laws. No feeding without permission. No killing except in self-defense or sanctioned execution. And the ones who break those laws are dealt with by the house courts. Or used to be, before the accord started failing. Lucian finally took a drink from his glass, and Elena tried not to think about where it came from. The houses are fracturing, Elena. Old alliances are dissolving. Vampires like those outside, they want chaos. They think the old laws are obsolete, that we should take what we want from mortals without asking. And you? I think chaos leads to exposure. And exposure leads to extinction. Ours and possibly yours. He set down the glass with deliberate care. That's why they're watching me. Why they're testing my boundaries. They want to see if I'll break my neutrality. If I'll fight. Will you? Lucian's smile was sharp and cold. For the right reasons? I've fought wars that would make your history books weep. I'm old, Elena. Old enough to know when to walk away, and old enough to know when walking away is no longer an option. Outside, the first gray hint of dawn was touching the eastern sky. Elena could see it through the wavy glass of the windows. Lucian noticed her gaze and stood abruptly. Dawn, he said. I need to retreat before the sun rises fully. You should rest. We'll talk more tonight. Wait. Elena stood as well, her head spinning with information overload. Can you go out in sunlight? No, that part of the stories is true. Daylight won't turn me to ash, but it will weaken me considerably. Make me vulnerable. He moved toward the stairs with that uncanny speed, which is why I need you to promise me something. What? While I sleep, don't open that door. Don't answer it. Don't even look outside unless you have to. The daylight protects you from most of my kind, but not from your husband, and not from human servants who work for vampire houses. The thought of Marcus finding her while Lucian was unconscious sent ice through Elena's veins. I promise, she said. Lucian nodded, already halfway up the stairs. Then he paused, looking back. For what it's worth, Elena, you're safe here. I meant what I said. Sanctuary isn't a word I use lightly. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in the cafe as dawn broke over the city. She returned to her room and locked the door, her mind churning with impossible truths. She'd fled one nightmare and stumbled into another, but somehow, impossibly, She felt safer in a building full of darkness than she ever had in her own home. Chapter 5. Daylight siege. Elena didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the ancient bed as sunlight crept across the stone floor, watching the bars of light move like a clock marking time. Her phone sat silent on the nightstand. She turned it off hours ago, unable to bear Marcus's increasingly frantic messages. By now he would have escalated, called the police probably, painted her as unstable, suicidal, a danger to herself. He was good at that, making himself the victim. Around 10 in the morning, her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch. Elena ventured downstairs cautiously, half expecting to find Lucien despite his warnings about daylight. But the cafe was empty, suspended in stillness like a photograph. Dust motes floated in the sunbeams that managed to penetrate the heavy curtains. She found the kitchen through a door behind the counter. It was surprisingly modern compared to the rest of the building. Stainless steel appliances, though all covered in a fine layer of dust. The refrigerator was nearly empty except for bottles of the dark liquid Lucien had been drinking. Elena quickly closed it and found a pantry stocked with canned goods, pasta, coffee, food that didn't spoil. Food for guests, not the owner. She was making coffee when she heard the knock at the front door. Elena froze, the kettle in her hand. Lucien's warning echoed in her mind. Don't open that door. Don't answer it. The knock came again, more insistent. Then a voice, muffled by the heavy wood but unmistakable. Elena? Baby, I know you're in there. Please, just talk to me. Marcus. Her hand tightened on the kettle handle until her knuckles went white. How had he found her? This place wasn't on maps, Lucien had said. People walked past without seeing it. Elena, please. Marcus's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine anguish. He'd always been good at sounding genuine. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please let me explain. Let me make this right. She'd heard these words before. After the first time he'd hit her. After the second. Each apology more elaborate than the last. Each promise more heartfelt. And each time she'd believed him, until belief became impossible. I talked to Dr. Morrison, Marcus continued. He said I need help. Anger management, therapy, whatever it takes. I'm willing to do it, Elena. I'm willing to change. Just please come home. We can work through this together. Dr. Morrison. Their couples therapist, who always somehow made Elena feel like she was the problem, who suggested she be more understanding of Marcus's stress, more supportive. I called your sister, Marcus said, his tone shifting slightly, still pleading but with an edge now. She's worried sick. Everyone is. The police are looking for you. They think you might hurt yourself. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. If she didn't come out, he'd have her committed, declared incompetent. It's what he'd threatened before, during her last failed escape. Elena backed away from the door, her heart hammering. She needed to wake Lucien, but where was he? Somewhere in the building, dead to the world while the sun blazed outside. Vulnerable, he'd said. Elena. Marcus's voice went hard. I know you're in there. I tracked your phone to this address before you turned it off. Open the door. We need to talk, now. She heard something then. The scrape of metal. He was trying the door handle. Testing it. This is ridiculous, Marcus muttered, loud enough for her to hear, breaking into some abandoned cafe. Jesus, Elena, what were you thinking? He couldn't see it. He'd found the address but couldn't see the cafe for what it was. Lucien had been telling the truth about the protections, but Marcus could still break in. Lucien had said the daylight protected her from vampires, not from humans. The door handle rattled more violently. Marcus was getting angry. She could hear it in his breathing, in the muttered curses. This was the pattern. Apologies first, then frustration, then rage. She had maybe minutes before he escalated to breaking a window. Elena ran upstairs as quietly as she could, her mind racing. She needed to find Lucien, but where? She'd only seen the guest room. There had to be other chambers. Somewhere he went during the day. She tried doors along the hallway, a bathroom, a storage closet, another guest room. All empty. Below she heard the sound of breaking glass. Marcus had made his decision. Elena! His voice echoed up the stairs, and the sound of it in this space, her space, her sanctuary, filled her with a rage she hadn't known she possessed. The last door at the end of the hall was different from the others. Heavier, with an iron handle worn smooth by centuries of use. Elena grabbed it and pulled. The room beyond was dark, the windows covered with heavy shutters that blocked out every trace of sunlight. She could barely see, her eyes struggling to adjust. But in the center of the room, on a bed that looked older than countries, lay Lucian. He was utterly still, his skin pale as marble in the darkness. His chest didn't move. For a horrible moment, Elena thought he was dead, truly dead, but then she remembered. This was what vampires were during the day, not sleeping, suspended. "Lucian," she whispered, approaching the bed. "Lucian, please. He's here. Marcus is here, and I don't know what to do." Nothing. Not even a flicker of awareness. Below, she heard Marcus moving through the café, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. "Elena, I'm not playing games anymore. Get down here!" She shook Lucian's shoulder. His skin was cold, unyielding. "Please wake up, please." A crash from downstairs. Marcus throwing furniture, probably. Working himself into the fury she knew so well. Elena's hand moved to Lucian's face, and that's when she saw it. A glint of metal on the bedside table. A knife ornate and old, its blade stained dark. Next to it, a small crystal glass, empty. Blood. For emergencies, maybe? For waking? She didn't let herself think. There wasn't time for thought. Elena grabbed the knife and drew it across her palm in one quick motion. Pain flared bright and immediate, but she ignored it, holding her bleeding hand over Lucien's mouth. "Please," she whispered as her blood dripped onto his lips. "Please wake up. I need you." For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Lucian's eyes snapped open, pure black from edge to edge, and his hand shot up to grip her wrist with inhuman strength. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. One moment he was corpse still. The next, he was sitting upright, pulling her bleeding hand to his mouth, his tongue moving against her palm in a way that was both horrifying and intimate. Then awareness flooded back into his eyes. The black receded, revealing dark brown again. He released her hand immediately, his expression shifting from feral hunger to shock to something like horror. "Elena, what did you—" "He's here," she gasped. "Marcus, he broke in. I didn't know what else to do." Lucian was on his feet before she could blink, steadying her with one hand, while the other grabbed a cloth from the nightstand to wrap her bleeding palm. His movements were still too fast, not quite human, but controlled now. "Stay here," he commanded. "Don't come downstairs until I call for you." But the sunlight is irrelevant now. His smile was sharp and dangerous, and Elena saw the predator beneath the gentleman for the first time. "You woke me, fed me, and gave me a reason to act. Your husband has made a grave mistake breaking into my home." He was gone before she could respond, moving through the darkness toward the stairs. And Elena, despite his order, followed. She had to see this, had to see Marcus face something he couldn't control, couldn't manipulate, couldn't charm or threaten or hurt. She had to see him be afraid. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. Elena reached the top of the stairs just as Lucian stepped into the cafe's main room. Sunlight slanted through the broken window Marcus had smashed, cutting bright lines across the floor. Lucian moved through them without hesitation, though Elena noticed the way his jaw tightened, the slight strain in his posture. It hurt him, she realized. The daylight weakened him, but her blood had given him enough strength to push through. Marcus stood in the center of the room, his back to the stairs. He'd knocked over several chairs, shattered a display of antique cups. His shoulders were heaving with exertion or rage or both. When he heard footsteps, he spun around. Finally. "Elena, get your things. We're—" He stopped mid-sentence, seeing not his wife but a stranger. A man who moved with dangerous grace despite the sunlight. "Who the hell are you?" "The owner of the property you just destroyed." Lucian's voice was cold, empty of inflection. He stopped just outside the brightest patch of sunlight, his eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. "You need to leave, now." Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to derision. He was taller than Lucienne, broader in the shoulders, and used to intimidating through physical presence. "I'm not going anywhere without my wife. Elena!" He raised his voice, calling up the stairs. "Get down here." Elena felt her legs want to obey, 3 years of conditioning trying to assert itself. But she gripped the banister and stayed where she was. "She's not coming with you," Lucien said quietly. "The hell she isn't." Marcus took a step forward, his hands curling into fists. "I don't know who you think you are, buddy, but you're harboring my wife. That makes this a domestic situation, and the police won't find this building." Lucien smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You barely did, and you had an address. No one else will come. No one will hear you. This conversation is between us." Something in Lucien's tone must have penetrated Marcus's rage because he hesitated, really looking at the other man for the first time. Elena watched her husband's expression shift as he noticed details he'd missed in his anger, the unnatural stillness, the way the shadows seemed to cling to Lucien even in daylight, the predatory focus in eyes that caught the light strangely. "What are you?" Marcus asked, his voice losing some of its certainty. "Something very old, and very tired of men like you." Lucien moved closer, and this time he didn't avoid the sunlight. He walked straight through it, his skin beginning to redden where the light touched it, but his pace never slowing. "You hurt her, repeatedly, systematically. You broke her down and made her think she deserved it. You don't know anything about our marriage." But Marcus was backing up now, his bravado cracking. "Elena, tell him. Tell him you're just upset, that we had a fight and you overreacted." Elena found her voice, though it shook. "I didn't overreact. You hit me. You've been hitting me. That was an accident. You know I didn't mean, you meant it." The words came easier now, gathering momentum. "Every time. Every insult, every shove, every slap. You meant all of it." Marcus's face contorted with rage. He lunged toward the stairs, toward her, but Lucien was faster. One moment Marcus was charging forward. The next, Lucien had him by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. "Don't," Lucien said softly. "Ever reach for her again." Marcus clawed at Lucien's hand, his face turning red, then purple. His feet kicked uselessly in the air. Elena watched with a strange detachment, seeing her husband's strength mean nothing, his size meaningless against something older and infinitely more dangerous. "I could kill you." Lucien's voice remained conversational, almost gentle. "It would be easy. One twist and your neck breaks, one bite and you bleed out in seconds. I've killed better men than you for far less." "Lucien." Elena descended the stairs slowly, her wrapped hand throbbing. "Don't." He glanced at her, and she saw the struggle in his expression. The desire to end this threat warring with something else. Restraint, honor, the laws he'd mentioned. "He deserves it," Lucien said. "I know." Elena reached the bottom of the stairs, standing just outside the patch of sunlight where Lucien held Marcus suspended. "But if you kill him, you're not better than him. You're just stronger. I am nothing like him. Then prove it." She met his eyes, saw the black starting to bleed into the brown again. "Let him go. Not for him. For yourself." For a long moment, Lucien didn't move. Marcus's struggles were weakening, his face nearly purple now. Then, with visible effort, Lucien lowered him to the ground and released his throat. Marcus collapsed, gasping and coughing, his hands at his neck. But even as he struggled for air, Elena saw the rage still burning in his eyes. He wasn't broken, wasn't changed, just temporarily subdued. "Listen very carefully." Lucien crouched beside him, speaking quietly but with absolute authority. "You will leave this place. You will tell the police you found your wife and she's safe, that it was a misunderstanding. You will file for divorce and give her everything she asks for. You will never contact her again, never try to find her, never speak her name." "Or what?" Marcus choked out. "You'll kill me?" "No." Lucien's smile was terrible. "I'll let others know where to find you. There are things in this city far worse than me, things that would enjoy breaking a man like you slowly, over many nights, things that don't have my restraint or my sense of honor." He leaned closer, and Elena saw Marcus flinch. "I know where you live, Marcus, where you work, where your mother lives in the suburbs, where your brother coaches Little League on Tuesdays. I know everything about you now, every scent, every habit, every hiding place. If you ever come near Elena again, I will find you, and I will feed you to the house of thorn piece by piece." The certainty in Lucien's voice, the absolute conviction, finally broke through Marcus's rage. Elena saw true fear enter her husband's eyes for the first time. "Now get out of my cafe," Lucien said, standing, "before I change my mind about Mercy." Marcus scrambled to his feet, nearly falling in his haste. He looked at Elena one last time, and she saw him trying to find words, trying to reassert control, to make this somehow her fault, but whatever he saw in her expression made him swallow the words. He stumbled toward the broken window, climbing through it rather than taking the door. They watched him run down the street in the harsh noon sunlight, a man fleeing from monsters he'd never believed existed. When he was gone, Lucien swayed slightly. Elena reached for him instinctively, and he gripped her shoulder to steady himself. Where the sunlight had touched his skin, there were angry red burns, already beginning to blister. "You're hurt," she said. "It will heal." But his voice was strained. "Once the sun sets..." "I shouldn't have. That was reckless. Using that much strength during the day." "You did it for me. I did it because he needed to understand fear." Lucien released her shoulder, stepping back toward the shadows. Men like him only respect force, only understand consequences when they apply to themselves. Elena looked at her wrapped hand, at the blood seeping through the cloth. "I fed you, without asking, without understanding what it meant. You saved us both. That's what it meant." Lucien's expression softened despite his obvious pain. A vampire feeding from someone who offers freely. It creates a bond. Temporary but powerful. You gave me strength when I had none. That's not a small thing, Elena. Will he come back? No. The certainty in Lucien's voice was absolute. He believes in his own survival above all else. He knows now that coming here means death. He'll divorce you quietly, quickly, and disappear from your life. Men like Marcus are cowards at their core. The adrenaline was fading, leaving Elena hollow and shaking. She'd stood up to Marcus, actually stood up to him, refused to obey, watched him face consequences. It should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt exhausted. "Come," Lucien said gently. "Let me tend your hand properly. Then I need to retreat before the sun damages me further." He led her back to the kitchen, moving carefully through the patches of light. As he cleaned and bandaged her palm with surprising gentleness, Elena studied his burned skin, the way he winced when sunlight glanced off the steel counter. "Thank you," she whispered, "for protecting me, for not killing him, even though you wanted to." Lucien finished wrapping her hand and met her eyes. "Thank you for stopping me. Mercy isn't my nature anymore. You reminded me it should be." Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of trust built on shared violence and mutual vulnerability. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and Lucien retreated to his darkness. Elena was finally, truly alone. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt free. Chapter 7. After the storm, Elena spent the afternoon cleaning. It was something to do with her hands, a way to process what had happened without thinking too deeply about it. She swept up the broken glass from the window Marcus had shattered, found boards in a storage room and nailed them over the opening. The physical labor felt good, grounding, purposeful. By the time the sun began its descent, painting the cafe in shades of amber and gold, she'd restored most of the damage. The overturned chairs were righted. The shattered cups, beyond repair, were wrapped and disposed of. She'd even found cleaning supplies and scrubbed the floor until it gleamed. She was making tea when she heard movement upstairs. Soft footsteps, deliberate and careful. Lucien, awake with the sunset. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking restored. The burns from earlier had healed completely, leaving no trace on his pale skin. He'd changed clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. For the first time since they'd met, he looked almost casual. "You cleaned," he observed, surveying the cafe. "I needed to do something." Elena poured a second cup of tea without asking. "Besides, I made the mess by letting him in." "You didn't let him in." He broke in. "There's a difference." Lucien accepted the tea, though she suspected he wouldn't drink it. "How's your hand?" She flexed her bandaged palm. Sore, but I've had worse." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Lucien's expression darkened. "You shouldn't have had to endure any of it," he said quietly. "No. But I did, and now it's over." Elena sat at the table, suddenly exhausted despite her afternoon of activity. "He'll really leave me alone?" "You're certain?" "I'm certain." Lucien sat across from her, falling into what was becoming their familiar position. "I've been reading people, reading prey, for centuries. Marcus is a predator who hunts the vulnerable. He has no courage when faced with something that can actually hurt him. He'll slink away and find another victim, someone he hasn't already marked as dangerous." The thought of Marcus hurting someone else made Elena's stomach turn. "Shouldn't we, warn someone? Stop him?" "We could. But the mortal justice system moves slowly, and he's clever enough to avoid consequences in your world." Lucien's fingers drummed once on the table, the first fidget she'd seen from him. "In my world, however, there are ways. I can put word out among the night courts. Make it known that Marcus carries a mark. Any vampire who encounters him will know he's forbidden prey, but also fair game for observation. If he harms another woman, he'll find himself facing consequences he can't escape or explain. The vampires will police him. Some will. Others simply enjoy having mortal pawns to torment when they're bored. Either way, he'll be watched, constantly. It tends to make men like him paranoid, prone to mistakes." A cold smile touched Lucien's lips. "I've seen it drive stronger men than him to madness." It should have disturbed her, this casual discussion of supernatural surveillance and psychological torture. Instead, Elena felt a grim satisfaction. Let Marcus feel hunted for once. Let him look over his shoulder and wonder what was watching from the shadows. "You think I'm cruel?" Lucien said, reading her expression. "No. I think you understand justice differently than I was taught to." Elena wrapped her hands around her teacup. "And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe the kind of justice I believed in doesn't work for people like Marcus. Or people like me. Are you so different from him?" The question was out before she could stop it. "You said you've killed. That you could have killed him easily. What makes you better than a predator?" Instead of being offended, Lucien seemed to consider the question seriously. "Choice," he said finally. "And consent. I choose not to kill unless necessary. I take blood only from those who offer it willingly, who understand what they're giving. I could simply take. My strength, my speed, my ability to influence mortal minds makes it easy. But I don't. That choice, made every night for over 300 years, is what separates me from monsters, both human and vampire. 300 years. Elena tried to imagine that span of time and failed. "How old were you when you were turned?" 28. Young enough to still believe I was immortal anyway, the way young men do, old enough to understand what I was losing when it actually happened." He gazed past her, into memory. "It was 1723. I was a soldier, wounded in a border skirmish no one remembers now. Dying slowly from infection. She found me in a field hospital and offered me a choice. Death by fever, or life as something else." "She?" "My maker, Celine. She ran a house in Paris, powerful and old even then. She needed soldiers for a coming war between vampire factions. She was honest about it. I wouldn't be human anymore, wouldn't see sunlight or taste food or father children. But I'd be strong, fast, nearly impossible to kill, and I'd have centuries to explore the world." Lucien's expression was complicated, mixing fondness with old pain. "I said yes. Most people would, facing death. But I didn't understand the price. Not really. What price? Watching everyone you love grow old and die while you remain frozen. Seeing the world change and change again while you stay the same. The loneliness of it, Elena. That's what the stories never capture. The profound, crushing loneliness of immortality." His voice had gone soft, almost vulnerable. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction exactly, though there was an element of that. More like recognition. She saw the wound in him now, the one that never healed. It was different from hers, but somehow parallel. "Is that why you withdrew from the houses?" she asked. "Because of the loneliness?" "Partially. Also disgust. As centuries passed, some vampires forgot why the old laws existed. They began to see mortals as prey instead of partners in an ancient compact. They started taking without asking, killing without consequence. I couldn't be part of that anymore. Lucian met her eyes. So I claimed this territory and declared neutrality. I'd feed only from willing donors. I'd enforce the old laws in my district, and I'd stay out of house politics entirely. But the House of Thorn won't let you stay neutral. No. They see neutrality as weakness, as territory to be claimed. He stood, moving to the boarded window. That's why those vampires were outside last night, testing boundaries, seeing if I'd defend my claim or simply give it up. Elena joined him at the window, though she stayed carefully back from where the boards let in slivers of twilight. What happens if they attack? Then I fight or I run. Or I negotiate. Lucian glanced at her. But now you're involved. They smelled you. Know you're here under my protection. That complicates things. How? Your leverage. A weakness they can exploit. If they take you, they can force me to surrender my territory. Or join them. Or simply make an example of us both to show what happens to vampires who refuse to fall in line. Fear prickled down Elena's spine. Then I should leave. Go somewhere else, somewhere far away. I've caused you enough trouble. No. Lucian's hand shot out, catching her wrist. Not hard, but firm. That's exactly what they want. To isolate us both, make us easier targets. Together we have a chance. Separated, we're both vulnerable. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, perhaps unconsciously, and Elena felt her pulse jump. She wondered if he could feel it too, if he could hear the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. I don't know how to fight vampires, she said quietly. Then I'll teach you. Not to fight them directly, you're mortal, you'd lose. But there are other ways. Ways to survive, to escape, to turn their own rules against them. Lucian released her wrist, stepping back. The old laws are complex, full of loopholes and protections for mortals who know how to invoke them. If you're going to stay in my world, even temporarily, you need to understand how it works. And you'll teach me? Everything? Everything I can. Starting tonight. He moved toward the counter, pulling out a leather-bound journal so old the pages had yellowed. These are the laws as I learned them. Some are obsolete, some are still honored, some are debated endlessly in the night courts. But knowing them gives you power. Knowledge is armor, Elena, especially against predators. She joined him at the counter, looking down at the elegant handwriting that filled the pages. Latin, French, languages she didn't recognize. But Lucian's finger traced one passage, and when he spoke, he translated. No vampire shall take blood without consent freely given. No vampire shall enter a dwelling uninvited. No vampire shall kill save in defense or execution. And no vampire shall claim a mortal ward without accepting full responsibility for their safety and well-being. He looked at her. That last one, that's what I invoked when I offered you sanctuary. It's an old protection, rarely used anymore. But once invoked, it's binding. What does it mean? Full responsibility? It means your safety is now my honor. If you're harmed while under my protection, I'm accountable to the night courts. It's why the other vampires can't simply take you. Doing so would be a direct challenge to my house claim, even though I no longer formally hold a house. Elena absorbed this, the weight of what Lucian had offered her becoming clear. He hadn't just given her shelter. He'd bound himself to her protection in a way that carried real consequences in his world. Why? She whispered. Why risk so much for a stranger? Lucian closed the journal, his expression unreadable in the gathering dark. Because, he said finally, I'm tired of watching people die when I could have saved them. Chapter 8. Lessons in Darkness. The next 3 nights passed in a strange rhythm. Elena slept during the day while Lucian lay in his suspended state, and when darkness fell, he taught her the rules of his world. They sat at the café table each evening, the leather journal open between them, while Lucian explained the intricate web of vampire politics. There were 12 major houses, each controlling territories across the globe. The House of Thorn was one of the oldest, ruthless, expansive, and currently breaking the accords that had kept peace for centuries. The accords were established after the last Great War, Lucian explained on the second night, his finger tracing a map he'd drawn. 1793. The war had exposed our existence to too many mortals. We came close to being hunted to extinction. So the houses agreed to rules: limited feeding, no mass killings, no turning humans without approval from the local house lord. In exchange, we'd be left alone. But the Accords are failing now? Elena leaned closer to study the map, noting the territories marked in red. House of Thorns expanding domain. They started crumbling about 50 years ago. The world changed too fast. Photography, then video. Now everyone carries cameras in their pockets. It's harder to hide, harder to control who sees what. Some houses think the old ways are obsolete, that we should stop pretending to coexist and simply take control. Lucian's jaw tightened. Others of us remember what happens when we stop hiding. Remember the purges, the witch hunts, the paranoia. You were alive during the witch trials. I watched people burn for far less than what I am. His voice went cold. I've seen what mortal fear can do when it finds a target. No vampire who lived through those centuries wants to risk it again. But the young ones, the ones turned in this last century, they think they're invincible. They don't remember being hunted. Elena absorbed this, trying to imagine the weight of those memories. The House of Thorn? They're young? No, that's what makes them dangerous. They're ancient, but they've decided the Accords no longer serve their interests. They're absorbing smaller houses, forcing others into alliances, and anyone who refuses. Lucian didn't finish the sentence, but Elena understood. Is that what they want from you? Alliance or death? They want my territory. This district is small but strategically important. It connects 3 major domains. Whoever controls it controls movement between houses. He closed the journal. I refused their initial offer 6 months ago. Since then, they've been patient, testing, waiting for me to make a mistake. And taking me in was a mistake? No, Lucian met her eyes. It was a choice. One I'd make again. The certainty in his voice made something flutter in Elena's chest. She pushed it down, focusing instead on the practical. What are my actual defenses? You said knowing the laws gives me power. Several things. Lucian stood, beginning to pace as he spoke, a habit she'd noticed when he was teaching. First, the threshold law. Vampires can't enter a dwelling uninvited. It's not psychological. It's a physical compulsion woven into what we are. Even if a door is open, even if we're chasing prey, we can't cross a threshold without permission. Permission from who? Anyone who lives there? Owner, resident, even a guest who's been staying more than 3 nights. He gestured around the café. You've been here 3 nights now. As of tonight, you can revoke invitations. Even mine. Elena blinked. I could lock you out of your own home? Technically, yes. Though I'd appreciate if you didn't. A hint of amusement touched his features. It would make things awkward. What else? Blood wards. If you're wearing a symbol marked with blood willingly given, most vampires will sense it and know you're protected. It won't stop them, but it makes attacking you a direct challenge to whoever warded you. You could ward me. I already have, in a sense. By claiming you as a ward, my scent is on you. Other vampires can smell it. Lucian stopped pacing, his expression growing serious. But a physical ward is stronger, more visible. It sends a clearer message. He moved to the counter and returned with a small silver pendant on a chain. The pendant was shaped like a stylized thorn wrapped around a crescent moon. Beautiful and vaguely menacing. This was Marguerite's, he said quietly. My sister. She never wore it because I never told her what it meant. I thought I was protecting her by keeping her ignorant. He held it out to Elena. I won't make that mistake again. Elena took the pendant, feeling the weight of it in her palm. The silver was warm, as if it had been held recently. What do I do? May I? Lucian gestured to her hand, the one she'd cut 3 nights ago. The wound had healed to a thin pink line. She nodded, and he produced a small knife from his pocket. With surprising gentleness, he reopened the cut, just barely, enough to draw a few drops of blood. Then he took the pendant and let her blood fall on the silver. 3 drops that seemed to sink into the metal rather than pool on its surface. By my blood and my house name, I ward this mortal against harm, Lucian said formally. Let all who see this mark know she walks under my protection. Let any who harm her face my retribution. The pendant flared with brief warmth in Elena's palm, then cooled. When Lucian took it back and fastened it around her neck, she felt a subtle shift, like the weight of invisible armor settling over her shoulders. It won't stop a determined attack, Lucian warned, but it will make them think twice. And if they do attack, every vampire in the city will know who's responsible and who they've crossed. Elena touched the pendant, feeling it rest just below her collarbone. Thank you. There's one more thing you need to know. The most important thing. Lucian's expression grew grave. If a vampire offers you a bargain, any bargain, don't accept without understanding the terms completely. Our words have weight, Elena. Power. A deal made with a vampire is binding in ways your world doesn't understand. We can't lie outright, but we can twist truth until it serves our purposes. You can't lie? Not directly. It's part of the old magic, the curse that made us. We can deceive, misdirect, omit crucial details, but an outright lie is impossible. That's why contracts and bargains are so important. The words mean exactly what they say, no more and no less. Elena thought about all their conversations, reviewing them for deception. Have you deceived me? I've omitted things. Context you weren't ready for. Details that would have terrified you unnecessarily. Lucian met her gaze steadily. But I haven't lied. When I said you're safe here, I meant it. When I said I'd protect you, I meant it. Every word I've spoken to you has been truth as I understand it. And if I asked you something you didn't want to answer truthfully, I'd tell you I can't answer. Or I'd answer with a question. Or I'd change the subject. A wry smile crossed his face. We've had centuries to develop techniques for avoiding unwanted truths. But ask me directly, and I'll either answer honestly or refuse. I won't lie to you, Elena. That's a promise. The weight of that promise settled between them. Elena found herself studying his face in the candlelight. The sharp angles, the dark eyes that had seen centuries, the mouth that could be cruel or gentle depending on the moment. He was dangerous, she knew that, inhuman, capable of violence that would horrify her. But he was also the first person in years who had truly kept her safe, who had asked nothing of her except trust, and even that he'd earned rather than demanded. Teach me more, she said. Everything. I want to understand your world, so he did. They talked through the night, Lucian explaining blood debts and house hierarchies, the night courts and their complex rituals, the ways vampires fed and fought and loved. He told her about donors, humans who willingly gave blood in exchange for money, protection, or sometimes just the unique intimacy of the act. Is it intimate? Elena asked, then immediately regretted the question. Too personal, too revealing of the thoughts she'd been having. But Lucian answered seriously. It can be. Taking blood is intense for both parties. The vampire experiences not just nourishment, but connection. We taste emotions, memories, essence. And the human, if they're willing, can experience euphoria, a kind of bliss that comes from being consumed. He looked away. That's why consent is so crucial. Without it, we're simply taking, violating. With it, it can be transcendent. Elena's hand went unconsciously to the pendant at her throat. She remembered the moment in his room when she'd pressed her bleeding palm to his mouth, the way his tongue had moved against her skin, the strange intimacy of it, frightening and thrilling at once. You've never taken from me, she said, except when I forced you to. No, and I won't unless you offer freely, understanding exactly what it means. Lucian's voice was rough. You're under my protection, Elena. That creates a power imbalance. I won't abuse it. Even though you're hungry. I'm always hungry. It's the nature of what I am. He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. But I've learned control. I can wait. The tension in the air was suddenly palpable, charged with things neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Elena stood as well, aware that dawn was approaching. She could see the faintest hint of gray in the sky through the cracks in the boarded window. You should rest, Lucian said, not looking at her. Dawn is close. Elena nodded but didn't move. Lucian, thank you for all of this. For teaching me, protecting me, for treating me like someone worth saving. Chapter 9. The Siege. The attack came on the fourth night. Elena woke to the sound of breaking glass, not from downstairs this time, but from somewhere above. She sat upright in bed, her heart already racing. The room was dark, the candles long since burned out. Through the window she could see the moon was high. Past midnight, another crash, closer. Then voices, multiple, unfamiliar, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. She grabbed the pendant at her throat instinctively and moved to the door. Lucian had taught her the basics. Stay inside, lock the door, don't invite anyone in. But those rules assumed the threat was outside, not already in the building. The door to her room burst open before she could lock it. 3 figures stood in the hallway, backlit by candlelight from below. 2 men and a woman, all impossibly beautiful in the way Lucian was beautiful, too perfect to be human. But where Lucian moved with controlled grace, these 3 radiated predatory hunger. Their eyes reflected the light like animals. "There you are," the woman said, her accent French and old. "The little mortal who's caused so much trouble." Elena backed toward the window, her mind racing through everything Lucian had taught her. "This is sanctified ground. I'm under ward. Attacking me breaks the accords." "The accords are broken, child." One of the men stepped into the room, and Elena saw his fangs clearly now. Longer than Lucian's, less concealed. House Thorn makes new laws now, and one of those laws is that Lucian's protection means nothing. "Where is he?" the woman asked, tilting her head. "Where does the hermit hide during his sleep?" Elena said nothing. Lucian was somewhere in this building, vulnerable in his daylight death. If they found him, stubborn. The second man moved with that too-fast speed, suddenly inches from Elena's face. "We can smell him on you, smell his blood ward, but we can also smell your fear. Tell us where he sleeps and we'll make this quick. Refuse and—" A blur of motion, and suddenly the man was flying backward across the room. Lucian stood where he had been, dressed only in dark trousers, his hair disheveled. His eyes were completely black, the way they'd been when Elena had woken him with her blood. "You broke into my home," he said, his voice utterly cold. "Threatened someone under my protection. The penalty for that is death. 3 against 1, Lucian." The woman smiled, revealing her own fangs. "And you're weakened. We can smell it. When did you last feed properly? Weeks, months?" It was true, Elena realized. Lucien looked paler than usual, the shadows under his eyes more pronounced. He'd been living on stored blood, the bottles in the refrigerator, but it wasn't enough. "Wasn't fresh. I've killed more than 3 vampires at once," Lucien said, "some of them far older than you, but never while protecting a fragile mortal." The man Lucian had thrown was back on his feet, unharmed. "That changes the calculation. You can't fight us and keep her safe, so choose. Give her to us and keep your territory, or fight and lose both." Lucian's hands curled into fists. Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his entire body had become a coiled weapon. But the vampires were right. He was outnumbered, and he couldn't let them near her, unless— "I offer freely," Elena said, her voice cutting through the tension. All 4 vampires turned to look at her. "My blood. I offer it freely to Lucien, with full understanding and consent. Right now." "Elena, no," Lucian started. "You said consent matters. You said it creates power." Elena moved toward him, ignoring the other vampires. "I'm giving it. Take what you need," the 3 intruders laughed. "How touching," the woman said. "The mortal thinks her little gift will make a difference." But Lucian's expression had changed. He was looking at Elena with something like awe mixed with concern. "Do you understand what you're offering?" "Not a few drops. It would weaken you, possibly hurt you." "I understand." Elena reached up and unclasped the pendant, setting it on the bedside table. Then she lifted her hair, exposing her neck. "I trust you. Take what you need. Save us both." For a heartbeat, Lucian didn't move. Then his hand cupped the back of her head, gentle despite the violence radiating from him. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. "This will hurt at first," he whispered against her ear. "Then it won't. I promise." His mouth pressed against her neck, and Elena felt his fangs, sharp, impossibly sharp, pierce her skin. The pain was immediate and bright, making her gasp. But Lucian held her steady, one hand cradling her head, the other supporting her weight. And then, just as he'd promised, the pain transformed into something else. Warmth spread through her body, starting at her neck and flowing outward. Her knees went weak, but Lucian held her easily, drinking deep. She could feel him changing. the tension in his body shifting from defensive fear to lethal confidence. His grip on her tightened, not painfully but possessively, and Elena felt an answering heat bloom in her chest. This was intimacy beyond anything she'd experienced, being consumed, being needed, being trusted with someone's survival. When Lucian finally pulled back, his eyes had returned to their normal dark brown, but they blazed with power. His fangs were still extended, stained with her blood, and his expression was terrifying and beautiful at once. "Last chance," he said to the three intruders, his voice carrying a weight it hadn't before. "Leave now, or don't leave at all." The woman's smile faltered. She could sense the change in him, the surge of strength from fresh blood freely given. "You're still outnumbered, am I?" Lucian released Elena gently, settling her on the bed. "You're in my territory, my sanctum. Every board, every brick, every shadow here answers to me. You broke in thinking I was weak. You were wrong." He moved then, faster than Elena could track. One moment he was beside her. The next, he had the first man by the throat, slamming him against the stone wall with enough force to crack it. The vampire barely had time to struggle before Lucian twisted, and Elena heard the sickening snap of a neck breaking. The body fell, not dead. Vampires didn't die that easily, but incapacitated. Healing would take time. The second man lunged at Lucian, but Lucian was ready. They blurred together, too fast for Elena to follow, crashing through furniture and walls. The violence was horrifying and mesmerizing. Inhuman strength meeting inhuman speed, neither showing mercy. The woman moved toward Elena, clearly thinking the mortal was the easier target. But Elena remembered Lucian's lessons. She grabbed the pendant from the bedside table and held it up. "By Lucian's blood ward and house claim, I invoke protection," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Touch me and face the judgment of the night courts." The woman hesitated. Old laws had weight, even among those who claimed to reject them. Breaking a blood ward carried consequences that transcended house politics. That hesitation was enough. Lucien was there, pulling the woman backward with brutal efficiency. "You threatened what's mine," he said, and there was something ancient in his voice now. Something that predated language. "You violated sanctuary. You broke the oldest law. House Thorn will—" the woman started. "House Thorn will hear that 3 of their vampires attacked a warded mortal and were destroyed for it. They'll hear that I still hold this territory and will kill anyone else they send." Lucian's hand was at her throat now, squeezing. "Unless you'd prefer to deliver that message yourself." The woman clawed at his hand uselessly. Behind them, the second man was finally still, his body broken in ways that would take days to heal. The café looked like a battlefield. Furniture destroyed, walls cracked, blood, both red and the strange dark substance that flowed in vampire veins, splattered across the floor. "Go," Lucian said, releasing the woman. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them Elena is mine and I will end anyone who touches her. Tell them the hermit still has teeth." The woman stumbled back, her composure finally cracking. She grabbed her companion, the one with the broken neck, and fled, half dragging him down the stairs. Elena heard the door slam, then silence. Lucian stood in the wreckage of her room, breathing hard despite not needing breath. His chest was heaving, his hands still curled into weapons. Slowly, his eyes found hers. "Are you hurt?" His voice was hoarse. Elena touched her neck, feeling the dual puncture wounds. They'd already stopped bleeding. "No, just dizzy." He was beside her in an instant, checking her pulse, examining the bite mark with clinical precision. "I took too much. You need food, water, rest?" "We won." Elena's voice sounded far away, even to herself. "They're gone. For now." Lucian lifted her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "But they'll report back. House Thorn will send more. Stronger vampires. Better prepared. So what do we do?" Lucian carried her down the stairs, moving through the destroyed café toward the kitchen. "We prepare, we plan, and we hope I can negotiate with the one vampire in this city who might actually help us." "Who?" He set her down gently at the kitchen table and began preparing food with efficient, practiced movements. "Someone I swore I'd never speak to again. Someone who betrayed me a century ago, but who still honors the oldest laws." "Lucian, you're being cryptic." He turned, meeting her eyes, and she saw genuine worry there. I'm taking you to meet my maker, the vampire who turned me, Celine. Chapter 10. The Choice. They left the cafe an hour before dawn, moving through streets that seemed to hold their breath. Elena wore clothes from the wardrobe, a dark dress that belonged to another era, a coat that smelled of lavender and thyme. Lucian had insisted she eat and drink before they left, restoring some of the strength his feeding had taken. The bite on her neck was hidden beneath a silk scarf, but she could still feel it, a warm, tender reminder of what had passed between them. The address Lucian led her to was in the oldest part of the city, where buildings leaned against each other like tired dancers. He stopped before a townhouse with black iron gates and windows that reflected nothing, not even the streetlights. This is Celine's domain, he said quietly. She's powerful, Elena, ancient, and she doesn't do anything without calculating the cost and benefit. When we speak to her, let me negotiate. Don't offer anything, don't agree to anything. Do you understand? Elena nodded, though anxiety coiled in her stomach. She touched the pendant at her throat for reassurance. Lucian didn't knock. He simply stood before the gate and spoke into the darkness. Celine, I invoke the Maker's debt. I need to speak with you. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the gate swung open silently, and a woman appeared in the doorway of the townhouse. She was stunning in a way that hurt to look at directly. Perfect bone structure, pale skin that seemed to glow from within. Dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders. She wore a crimson gown that looked like it cost more than Elena's car, and her eyes, when they fixed on Lucienne, held centuries of complicated history. Lucienne. Her voice was rich, accented with old French. 300 years and you finally come crawling back. How delightful. I'm not crawling. I'm negotiating. Lucian's tone was carefully neutral. May we enter? Celine's gaze shifted to Elena, and Elena felt the weight of it like a physical touch. Those eyes catalogued everything, the bite mark beneath the scarf, the blood-ward pendant, the way Elena stood close to Lucian despite her obvious fear. The mortal too? My, you have been busy. Celine smiled, revealing delicate fangs. Come in, both of you. Let's discuss what brings my wayward child back to my door after so very long. The interior of the townhouse was opulent, all dark wood and velvet, artwork that belonged in museums, furniture that was genuinely antique rather than merely old. Celine led them to a sitting room where a fire burned despite the relatively warm night. She settled into a high-backed chair like a queen on a throne and gestured for them to sit. Lucian sat on the sofa. Elena sat beside him, close enough that their arms touched. She noticed Celine's eyes track the movement, noting the familiarity. So, Celine said, pouring blood wine into crystal glasses. She offered one to Lucienne, pointedly ignored Elena. House Thorn has finally forced your hand. I wondered how long you'd hold out. You know about the attacks? Everyone knows, darling. The whole city is watching to see if the hermit will bend or break. Celine sipped her wine. 3 of Thorn's vampires beaten by a single defender. Impressive, though I hear the defender had help. Her eyes flickered to Elena. Fresh blood. Freely given. That does make a difference. House Thorn will send more, Lucian said. Older vampires. A coordinated assault. I can't defend my territory alone, not indefinitely, and I won't abandon Elena to do it. Ah, yes, the mortal. Celine set down her glass and leaned forward, studying Elena with undisguised curiosity. Tell me, little human, what makes you worth all this trouble? Why would my proudest creation risk everything for you? Elena felt Lucian tense beside her, but she spoke before he could. I don't know that I'm worth it, but he offered me sanctuary when I needed it, and I'm not going to let him face consequences alone. Sanctuary. How charmingly old-fashioned. Celine's smile sharpened. Do you know what you've walked into, child? The war that's coming. House Thorn wants to break the Accords entirely. They want to rule openly, take mortals as cattle, end centuries of careful balance. Every vampire in this city will have to choose a side. Neutrality won't exist anymore. Then help us, Lucian said. You still have influence. Houses that respect you. If you vouched for my territory claim, why would I do that? Celine interrupted. You rejected me, Lucian. Rejected my house, my teachings, everything I offered you. You've spent centuries hiding away. pretending to be better than the rest of us. Why should I protect you now? Because you made me what I am. Lucian's voice was low but intense. You chose me, turned me, taught me everything I know about surviving as a vampire. That creates a bond, whether either of us likes it or not. I'm invoking the Maker's debt. You owe me protection. The debt applies to newly turned fledglings, not vampires who've been independent for centuries. But Celine's tone had shifted, becoming more considering than dismissive. However, I'll make you an offer. Join my house again. Bring your territory, your skills, your experience. In exchange, I'll protect you and your pet mortal from House Thorn. No. Lucian's response was immediate. No? Just like that? Celine's eyebrows rose. Don't you want to think about it? Discuss it with your little human? There's nothing to discuss. I left your house because I disagreed with your methods. That hasn't changed. Methods? Celine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You mean my refusal to pretend we're anything but predators? My dear boy, the Accords are dying because they were always a fantasy. We're vampires. We feed on humans. Trying to make that relationship equal or consensual is absurd. It's not absurd, Elena said quietly. Both vampires turned to look at her. It's called respecting boundaries. Recognizing that someone weaker than you is still a person, still deserving of choice. Celine studied her for a long moment. You fed him willingly, offered your blood when he needed strength. Why? Because he protected me. Because he treats me like I matter. Elena met the ancient vampire's gaze steadily. Because he's the first person in years who's asked for consent instead of just taking what he wants. Something shifted in Celine's expression. A flicker of what might have been respect or possibly nostalgia. You remind me of someone. A human I knew long ago before I was turned. She had your stubbornness. She stood, moving to the window. I'll make you a different offer then. I won't back your territory claim, but I will give you something better. Information. What kind of information? Lucian asked warily. House Thorn's weakness. The one thing they care about more than expansion. Celine turned back to face them. They're searching for the Crimson Codex, the original text of vampire law written in the blood of the first vampires. Legend says whoever possesses it can rewrite the Accords themselves, make new laws that all vampires must follow. That's a myth, Lucian said. Is it? Then why has Thorn spent decades hunting for it? Why have they absorbed every house that might have knowledge of its location? Celine's smile was sharp. I know where it is, Lucian. And I know they know you're the one person who might actually be able to retrieve it. Why would I? Because it's hidden in daylight. In a place only a vampire with a mortal companion could access. Celine moved closer, her voice dropping. Get me the Codex, and I'll use it to bind House Thorn to the old laws. Force them to honor your territory claim and leave you both in peace. Fail, and they'll keep coming until one of you is dead. Elena felt Lucian's tension beside her. Where is it? First, agree to my terms. Retrieve the Codex and bring it to me. In exchange, I use its power to end this war and protect your precious sanctuary. And what's to stop you from using it to make yourself the supreme power? Lucian asked. Nothing, except my word, which you know I can't break. Celine extended her hand. Do we have a deal? Lucian looked at Elena. In his eyes, she saw the question. Are you willing to risk this? To trust her? To walk into danger for a maybe peace? Elena thought about Marcus, about the cage her life had been, about the freedom she'd found in these few days with Lucian, learning to be strong again, learning that she deserved protection, deserved choice, deserved to matter. Do it, she said quietly. We'll find the Codex together. Lucian held her gaze a moment longer, then turned back to Celine and took her hand. We have a deal. Tell us where to find it. Celine's smile was triumphant. The old cathedral on Thornhill, the one they've been trying to demolish for years. The Codex is sealed in the crypt, warded with sunlight. You have until House Thorn discovers this meeting happened. I give you 3 nights at most. She released Lucian's hand and moved toward the door, dismissing them. Oh, and Lucian? Try not to get your mortal killed. I'd hate for this to be wasted effort. They left as dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold. Elena and Lucien walked in silence through the waking city until they reached the café. Inside, they began boarding up the additional damage, working together without speaking. Finally, as the sun fully rose, Elena broke the silence. Can we really do this? Find something that's been hidden for centuries? Lucian stopped hammering and looked at her. His expression was serious but not hopeless. I don't know, but I know I'm not facing it alone anymore, and neither are you. He crossed to her and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing the silk scarf that hid his bite mark. When this is over, if we survive, you'll have a choice to make, Elena. Stay in my world or return to yours. Stay mortal or... He didn't finish, but she understood. Or become like you. I would never pressure you, never expect it. But if you chose it freely, understanding everything it means, I would turn you. Give you centuries. Give you strength no one could ever take from you again. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. It was too soon for promises like this. Too soon to make decisions about forever. But looking into Lucian's ancient, honest eyes, she saw possibility. Not a cage, but a door opening into a future she'd never imagined. Ask me again, she whispered. When we've survived, when there's actual peace to make a choice in. Lucian smiled. A real smile, warm and almost human. It's a deal. As dawn blazed through the cracks in the boarded windows, Elena helped Lucian retreat to his darkness, then climbed the stairs to her room. She touched the pendant at her throat, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. 3 nights to find an ancient artifact, to stop a war, to save a vampire who'd saved her first. She'd faced worse odds before, or at least equally impossible ones. This time, though, she wasn't facing them alone.